December 25, 1867. Providence Morning Herald, Providence, Rhode Island. Christmas. Christmas brings us, with its religious ceremonies, festivities, and pleasant customs, which it is to be hoped that advancing rationalism will never cause to be forgotten. Yet it is worthwhile, at least for descendants of the Puritans, to remember that the 25th of December is probably not the date of Christ's birth, there being reason for believing that he was born in the spring of the year, a fitting season, it would seem, for such an event, and that our festivities at Christmas are of pagan origin, the dressing of houses with greens being a druidical custom, and the giving of gifts being a remnant of the Roman Saturnalia. The Feast of Yule, now confounded with that of Christmas, was observed at the winter solstice by all the northern nations, long before the introduction of Christianity. In this particular, as in many others, the early Christian leaders, knowing that men will generally abandon their principles more readily than their enjoyments, craftily preserved the old festivities and ceremonies, and gave them a Christian name and significance. The gifts were given to children and servants, not in the name of Satan, but in that of Christ, the receiver, so long as they received the gift, being careless as to the name in which it was given. The very name Christmas box, which, no longer heard here, is still used in England, keeps in mind a usage and thing of pagan origin. Gifts of money were given by the Romans at the Paganalia, which occurred at the beginning of the year, and the coins were received in earthen pots or boxes, a few of which still exist, one of them, at least, having been exhumed in England. These pots, in shape and size, are quite like the boxes in which English apprentices in the Middle Ages received their Christmas presents, and which were also of earthenware. Hence, it seems clear enough that the English Christmas box, which is now the name for the present which the box was formerly used to receive, is directly connected with Servius Tullius's Paganalia and also with Saturnalia. It is generally supposed that the Santa Claus who visits the children in this country on Christmas Eve, at least the happy rogues who live in this latitude, and put into their stockings toys and sometimes, by way of warning, a whip, is a Dutch saint, and that his visitation and its attendant circumstances are of Dutch origin. This, however, is not the case. The good saint's name, or rather, the form of it only, is Dutch. Saint Nicholas was the patron saint of children, he having restored to life some who had been killed and salted in a tub. He also, according to a medieval legend, saved the daughter of a nobleman from disgrace with the consent of the father by throwing into the house in the nighttime a mass of gold. Hence, presents were put into the shoes of children in the nighttime on the feast of Saint Nicholas, which came on the 6th of December, that they might suppose them to be the gifts of Saint Nicholas. Now in the Middle Ages, and, in fact, till within 200 years, children did not wear stockings. Those in humble life had breeches and bare legs, and often bare feet. The rich wore hose, which were like the tricot or tights of opera dancers, and covered the lower limbs and body from toe to waist. When the modern stocking came into use, that made a more convenient receptacle than a shoe for St. Nicholas's favors. These customs were valued by our forefathers, partly because they were believed to fix points of faith and facts of religious history in the minds of children, just as images were first introduced into Christian churches to aid the minds of ignorant and weak-brained worshippers in the formation of the idea of a person to whom their praises and their prayers were addressed. This fixing of events and beliefs in the minds of children by association was a part of household discipline, which, in our forefathers' days, did not always take so agreeable a shape as that of making presents. Children, poor, weak, helpless creatures, what they did not endure at the hands of those that were always stronger than they, but not always so very much wiser, used to be flogged, not only for punishment, but by way of fixing things in their memories. Thus, on Innocents' Day, well named it would seem, for more than one reason, children were whipped in their beds by their parents in order that the memory of Herod's murder of the innocents might stick the closer. This whipping was no mere sham or formula. It was administered by parents who believed that to spare the rod was to spoil the child, many of whom we may be sure found in their creed a convenient excuse for the indulgence of savage passions. In England, the boys of the parish were made once a year to walk over the parish boundaries with the authorities and were then and there in turn beaten, that they might remember those limits. The custom called beating the bounds, although the children and not the bounds were beaten, is not yet quite extinct in England in some of the remote rural districts, of which the bounds are still beaten by the parish beadle, accompanied by all boys subject to his authority. The flogging, however, is now omitted, but the boundary, wherever it may lead, is strictly followed by the procession. During a recent perambulation of this kind, the procession was brought to a stand. The parish boundary line passed directly through the oven, which projected from the side of a farmhouse. It had been the custom on beating the bounds for one of the boys to get into this oven, that the line might be followed, and that the important fact that Farmer So-and-so's oven was not at all in the parish might never be forgotten. But on the occasion we are speaking of, it happened that the good wife, forgetful or regardless of the day of the procession, was baking, and her oven was like Nebuchadnezzar's fiery furnace. No boy was found willing to play the part either of Shadrach, Meshach, or Abednego, and, upon grave consideration of the subject, the beadle came to the conclusion that it would hardly do to insist upon the usage under all the circumstances, shocking as it was that the parish boundary should not be followed. Finally, it was decided that the requirements of custom would be fulfilled pro hoc vice by a boy's clambering over the oven in the line of the boundary, and this, notwithstanding the heat and the uncertain footing given by the rounded top of the place, was done. But to return to our Christmas customs, mince, or rather minced pies, not only pertain to this season, but should rightfully be called Christmas pies. They used to be made in the form of a cradle or a manger typical of the Nativity, and the custom of making a pie of this kind at this season was derived from the presentation of paste images and sweetmeats to the Fathers of the Vatican on Christmas Eve. The origin of the latter custom has not been discovered, but it probably was, like most others of this kind, pagan. In the Middle Ages, the bakers at this season used to present their customers with Yule dough in images of baked paste. This custom has survived in our New Year cakes, or cookies as the Dutch called them, the figures on which are probably mere descendants and modifications of images with Christian names which themselves were descendants and representatives of heathen idols. With such tenacity do men cling to a once well-established popular custom. Minced pie. Having this origin and this significance, it must be admitted that the Puritans were not quite so narrow-minded as they have seemed to be in their refusal to eat them at Christmas time. It is only within a generation that the Presbyterian or Congregationalist, descendant of the Puritan of 2 centuries ago, has been persuaded to yield his principles and his digestion to the uncovenanted mercies of the maker of Christmas pies, profane, idolatrous, and indigestible. Galaxy.